Hi, this is Sunil Bhartia, and welcome to another episode of TFR Insights. And today we have with us once again Jason Nadeau, VP of Strategy and Marketing at Dremio. First of all, Jason, welcome to the show once again.
Great, thanks to be here. Good to talk to you again.
If you look at the current crisis that we are all going through, this pandemic, it is having serious impact not on our health, our lives, but also economy. Economies were shut down. There is an impact on the way organizations are going through their digital transformation journey or the cloud strategy. So, from your perspective, or from the perspective of provider of data lake, how is it affecting organizations' ability to migrate to the cloud, or as they embark or on their way to the cloud transformation journey?
I mean, this whole pandemic situation is accelerating a trend that has been underway for a while, right? I mean, people have been moving to the cloud for a lot of different reasons. A lot of, in particular, agility to be able to, to do things more quickly. But what we've found is that the existing requirements to both to move fast, but also to constrain costs, right? Because right now people are worried about anything that's spending dollars on things that they shouldn't. Everyone's scrutinizing their budgets, and they're trying to do more with fewer people. Like they're trying to focus on productivity. How do I make my teams more effective and more efficient? And I think what they're finding is that like dealing with the on-premises infrastructure that folks have had for obviously decades is sucking up a lot of money and a lot of time. Like it's just time that could be better spent actually focusing on the outcomes that they want to get. So in the world of analytics, like actually getting to the insights, right? Not messing around with the infrastructure. And so the pandemic has absolutely accelerated the shift to the cloud. People are moving fast, whether they're thinking about cloud data warehouses or cloud data lakes or SaaS services, any of the above. It's a way to, number one, get a lot more agility, but also number two, to really focus on paying for what you use. And that's what this pandemic has really highlighted. Like people don't want to make big long-term capital investments, especially right now. They want to be able to use a service. If they get value out of it, great, they'll use more of it. And they're only going to pay for that consumption. So that whole consumption model is a really big driver of the cloud in general, and we see the pandemic absolutely accelerating that.
When you do put something in a data warehouse, is there any kind of compromises that you made? Because when we look at cloud, public cloud, uh, they leverage a lot of latest open source technologies. You can move faster. If you have a multi-cloud strategy, you can even juggle between different clouds leveraging their technologies. Do you take a hit when you put your data in a data warehouse?
Well, so there's multiple sort of, I think, points kind of wrapped up in there. I think the point about multi-cloud is, first of all, a really important one, right? So I think the other thing that people have learned, organizations, in general, have learned from their on-prem experiences, is that they want freedom and flexibility. They don't want to be locked into any particular platform. And so even as they think about going to the cloud, yes, there's people might start with one or the other, and there's great sets of flexibility, and innovation happening in every one of these clouds, whether it's Amazon or Microsoft or Google. And so organizations are really looking for approaches that give them flexibility to use a cloud today, maybe put other services in a different one tomorrow, or mix and match. So that's happening for sure. But then the other thing is that kind of dovetails off this notion of wanting freedom and flexibility to kind of work with the information that you have in the ways that you want, is fundamentally a separation of compute and data. And so what this really means is that ability to bring and do all sorts of processing work to your data wherever it happens to live. Again, maybe you put some data assets in AWS, maybe you put some in Azure. People have that choice, which is fantastic. But they also want to be able to bring whatever processing to bear on that data that they need. And frankly, this is like an architectural paradigm, right? It's about being open and being able to bring whatever services you want. And so this gets to the question and the point around data warehouses. And data warehouse architecture, it was built as a monolithic structure to do analysis in a very structured way, obviously. And was created in a world that existed, that whole architecture before things like the public cloud existed. And so you can see that there are re-implementations of data warehouses in the cloud. So there are cloud data warehouses, that's, for sure. And that's much better in terms of a consumption model, for example, and scalability than things that were built for an on-premises environment. But it's still the same. It's still the same architecture. Ingest your data is all in there, and you can do with that data whatever the cloud data warehouse allows you to do. And so what we're seeing organizations say is they want to unlock that data. They want that data to be able to be exposed to all sorts of different processing engines, things that exist today, for sure, but even things that don't exist yet. Like, there's a lot of innovation that's happening and continuing to happen, particularly in the open source communities, but in commercial vendors too. Dremio is obviously one of those. But organizations want their data in a place that's open and accessible to all sorts of things. So, you can do data warehousing on data in a data lake without needing a data warehouse. And I think that's something that's that a lot of organizations are really, waking up to and realizing, holy cow, I don't need to do or use a data warehouse to do data warehousing. I can do a lot of that, maybe not all of it, but that's the sort of the trend that's happening more and more and more every day. You can do that stuff on the data that's just in your data lake, and pick your cloud vendor of choice. And so that separation of compute from data is a really, really important architectural trend that frees that data for all sorts of different initiatives. And we see organizations rapidly moving to that direction, again, for this freedom and flexibility that they need for productivity, for controlling costs, and frankly for delivering faster business results.
Sometimes you also have to worry about vendor lock-in. What are the risks there? As you said, with the public cloud, we can very easily move our workload wherever we want. That's the whole idea of multi-cloud strategy. But with data warehouses, are you kind of locked into that vendor itself, or you can very easily move around as you want?
It's really tough to move. And that's the challenge of any monolithic architecture, where you ingest your data into it, right? Data migrations, and frankly, migrations in general of workloads out of those big monolithic infrastructures, data warehouses is a perfect example of that. That's really tough, So I think that a lot of people, a lot of organizations, had that experience with their data warehouses, on premises, and they got locked in. And they could only do what their vendor could do. And as they are making the shift now to the cloud, right, they have a choice. They can say, okay, well, do we want to do the same data warehouse, monolithic architecture again, and ingest our data into that thing with a cloud data warehouse, or do it differently, right? Do it in the open architecture way with an open data lake architecture. Put the data first and foremost into the data lake. And then make it accessible to all sorts of things, which could include, by the way, a data warehouse, right? Like, you can take data from the data lake and still ingest some of that into a data warehouse for very specific use cases, right? And so we actually see that to be a pretty common pattern where organizations will do some sorts of things still in the classical data warehouse, because there's innovation there, and there's still good capabilities that can be useful for certain use cases. But more and more, a lot of other things, yes, they'll just leave it the data in the data lake. There's no lock-in. It's completely open, and it gives them that flexibility to do things differently, tomorrow or today, however they want to do it.
Right, and also one more thing that is happening in the pandemic is that more and more, not only your employees but your users, they are working remotely from home. And most companies are spread across the globe, so which also means that you now need access. You have to bring data to where the user. You cannot bring everybody into your corporate firewall as used to be the case earlier. How does that change?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Look, and there's another layer of that is just the data gravity, just the size of the data. Like, if you go back in time, the types of data we were thinking about was operational data, and there wasn't that much of it, and like, okay, well, clearly if you have long historical periods, you get a fair bit of data there too. But the reality is there are so many new types of data that are being generated, and that is driving the demand for all the storage that's some place to put it. One of the big reasons why things like cloud object storage, from AWS S3 or Microsoft ADLS. Why the amount of data that's being stored is just exploding, right? So that data is going there, and there's so much of it, you can't just pick it all up and go move it into something else, right? Like, yeah, you absolutely can't just put it into various different applications and kind of get your users that way. You want to bring people and applications to the data where it's living, and that's part again of this. Think of it as separation of compute and data, but and users too, right? Like services, which obviously the end users are going to interact with. We got to bring them to the data, and this trend is only accelerating, right? Every new device that's out there is generating more and more and more data, sensors and other things. That data is not going to be copied and moved from one place to another. It's going to live someplace. It's going to live in the cloud in an object store environment, and then other services are going to come in and get access to it. For whatever use case, whatever view they want to take, and so on. But there's just too much of it. Yeah.
So we were talking mostly from the perspective of this pandemic, but as we discussed earlier, also that a lot of lessons that we have learned, or a lot of practices that we are now kind of following, will kind of become a norm once we are through this crisis, because companies will see the benefit of those measures. So, what are some of the things that you see will kind of become new norms in the context of data warehouse, data lakes?
I think a big one is going to be just efficiency. People have forever wanted, and have cared about, productivity and efficiency. But I think what we're seeing is just a new normal of scrutiny around where are the dollars and the investments going, and are we getting value for that? And so, look, clearly there's a lots of changes in kind of work patterns and and work norms, but in terms of think of it as analytical infrastructure and how people use that and how they think about the services that they're consuming, and that they want to acquire and use to build things like data platforms or other initiatives that they have. We think there's absolutely an increased step function focus on what is how much am I spending for what I'm getting? So this is kind of the next level click down into people wanting consumption based models, right? They absolutely want to pay for what they use. That's true, but they also want to make sure that, hey, any service that they're consuming is actually an efficient service, and it's it's not consuming a bunch of resources that don't need to be consumed. It's going to actually as their scale usage goes up, that the kind of unit cost is continuing to drop down, and that all of that is just happening sort of almost automatically, right? And ideally, it is something that's happening automatically. And so I think what we're seeing is organizations really look for efficiency as a key criteria, cost efficiency specifically, and people efficiency too, because there's things have got to be easy to consume, right? They've got to be low cost to run and low cost to scale. But they also have to just be easy for people to use and to work with, because it's a more constrained environment. I think that's what people are just going to expect as a new normal. So that's again part of the drive to the cloud, right? And just because you go to the cloud doesn't mean things are easy. Also, right? I mean, there's a lot of very complicated cloud services that can exist, but that it's a lot easier to make a very highly consumable service or solution in the cloud than it is to do it on premises, where you're dealing with all sorts of the infrastructure kind of gotchas and whatnot there. So I think for IT and for providers, it's a new normal around ease of use. It's a new normal around consumption and cost efficiency. So things are going to get benchmarked not just on performance, where I had my got my assets, I got my servers and my storage, and how fast does stuff work on that? Now it's going to be, oh great, well I have a certain amount of performance. If you hit my SLA, how low cost can you deliver me that SLA? Right? That is going to become the new way of thinking about and benchmarking and selecting infrastructure.
Jason, you guys are also organizing, if I'm not wrong, your first event, right? It's Subsurface, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, the event is called Subsurface. It's a thought leadership event. So we are presenting it and we're hosting it. But it's not a Dremio specific event. So we're bringing in thought leaders, open source experts, folks in large enterprise industry that have had a lot of experience building data platforms, and we're bringing all these people together as a way to share knowledge, and we're really looking forward to hosting it, because there's a gap in the market around a place for cloud, data lakes for all those practitioners to come together, open source people, share best practices and learn. So we're really filling a big gap in the market. Again, it's not a Dremio specific thing. We'll be there, of course, and but we're really looking forward to hosting it, on the 30th.
Thank you, Jason, once again for taking your time out, and I look forward to talk to you again. And good luck with the event.
No, my pleasure. Thanks very much.